History often hides its darkest secrets behind layers of dust and silence. But some truths refuse to stay buried. The secret Nazi experiments of World War II are among those forbidden stories. A blend of science turned nightmare, ideology twisted into cruelty, and human suffering beyond imagination. For decades, these experiments were shrouded in mystery, dismissed as rumors, or intentionally erased from textbooks. Today, the veil is lifting. This video will take you deep inside the sinister world of Nazi scientific experiments, the motivations that fueled them, the horrifying procedures inflicted on innocent victims, and the chilling aftermath that still echoes in science and ethics today. We'll reveal how the thirst for power and racial purity led to some of the most inhumane acts ever recorded, and why their shadow still haunts us. Prepare yourself for a journey into darkness, but also into the resilient light of human dignity and the fight for justice. To truly understand these experiments, we must first grasp the terrifying context. The Nazi regime, led by Adolf Hitler, didn't just wage a war of armies and nations, it waged a war on humanity itself. It was a regime that sought to redefine life according to a brutal ideology of racial superiority. In this vision, science became a weapon, not to save lives, but to control, to dominate, and to destroy. The experiments weren't haphazard acts of madness, but carefully orchestrated projects with sinister objectives: to prove racial theories, to develop deadly weapons, and to push the boundaries of human endurance and biology. Victims were often prisoners in concentration camps, people stripped of their rights, their names, and their humanity. Many of these stories were buried under layers of official silence, misinformation, and the chaos of war's aftermath. But survivor testimonies, hidden documents, and painstaking investigations have unearthed the horrifying truth, a truth that challenges us to confront the darkest corners of science and morality. The Nazi obsession with race and purity was not merely rhetoric, it was the backbone of their horrific agenda. From the very early days of the Third Reich, scientists and doctors were enlisted to prove the supremacy of the Aryan race. The Ahnenerbe Institute, established in 1935, was a pseudo-scientific research organization dedicated to uncovering the origins of the Germanic peoples. But its work quickly devolved into racially charged, inhumane experimentation. This wasn't science in its purest form. It was science corrupted by hate. Researchers sought to justify ethnic cleansing through genetic proof. They studied skulls, bones, and living bodies, attempting to identify physical traits that marked superiority or inferiority. The Nazis performed gruesome anthropological studies on captured populations, often committing atrocities in the process. The ideology also sought to create the perfect human. Eugenics programs were implemented, aiming to sterilize and eliminate anyone deemed unfit. The Nazis used forced sterilization on hundreds of thousands across Europe, targeting people with disabilities, minority groups, and political prisoners. Behind the scenes, dark projects like Lebensborn tried to engineer pure Aryan children, abducting children from occupied territories to be raised as Germans. In the scientific community, this warped worldview led to a frenzy of experimentation aimed at improving soldier endurance, developing biological weapons, and attempting to manipulate human genetics. One chilling example is the experiments on twins by Dr. Joseph Mengele, who sought to discover how to alter human traits through genetic manipulation. But his research involved cruelty beyond belief, injecting chemicals into children's eyes to change their color, sewing twins together, and performing needless amputations. The real horror unfolded inside the concentration camps, where millions were imprisoned and murdered. Here, Nazi doctors conducted experiments that defied all ethics and humanity. At Auschwitz, Dr. Mengele's twin experiments became infamous. Twins were used as human guinea pigs to study heredity. Children were torn from families, subjected to surgeries without anesthesia, forced into starvation diets, and deliberately infected with diseases. Many died in agony. At Dachau, prisoners were subjected to brutal hypothermia experiments. Immersed in freezing water for hours, their bodies were tested to see how long they could survive extreme cold, mimicking conditions soldiers might face on the battlefield. Some were repeatedly frozen and thawed, suffering permanent injuries. Other experiments involved decompression chambers, simulating high altitudes to understand how pilots might survive in combat conditions. Prisoners often suffered ruptured lungs, unconsciousness, or death. Women at Ravensbrück, the women's concentration camp, were subjected to infection experiments, deliberately wounded and infected with gangrene and other bacteria to test the effectiveness of new treatments. Wounds were sometimes stuffed with glass shards or wood splinters to imitate battlefield injuries. These experiments were not isolated incidents, but systematic programs supported by Nazi leadership. The victims were mostly Jews, Roma, disabled people, political prisoners, and other marginalized groups. They suffered unimaginable pain and death. When the Allies won the war, they faced a moral dilemma. Many Nazi scientists had knowledge valuable to the US and Soviet military programs, especially in rocketry, aviation, and chemical warfare. The US launched Operation Paperclip, a secret program to recruit more than 1,600 former Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians. Among them was Werner von Braun, later a leading figure in the Apollo moon missions. This operation sparked controversy. Many of these scientists had been complicit in war crimes and human experimentation. How could justice be served if these men were given new identities and scientific freedom? Some historians argue that Cold War pressures forced the US to overlook past crimes to gain a strategic advantage against the Soviet Union. This raises profound ethical questions about accountability, justice, and the costs of scientific progress. The full extent of Nazi experiments remained hidden for decades. Some research was destroyed by retreating Nazis. Other records were buried or classified by Allied governments. Yet, decades later, evidence surfaced. Survivor testimonies, declassified files, and scholarly investigations. These have shaped modern bioethics, including the establishment of the Nuremberg Code, which laid down principles like informed consent and the prohibition of cruel, inhumane treatment. The legacy also lingers in controversial scientific debates. Some medical data derived from Nazi experiments, despite the horrific methods, has been cited in modern research, sparking ethical debates about the use of tainted data. The story of Nazi experiments remains a warning that science without ethics can become a weapon of destruction. The dark experiments of the Nazi regime are a chilling chapter in human history, a reminder of what can happen when ideology corrupts science and humanity. We remember the victims, honor their suffering, and learn from the past to build a future where science serves life, not death.